Hi everybody, welcome. Welcome to those of you joining us also on Zoom and streaming for that matter, but so happy that you're all here with us today. This is a special day with two artists in our current exhibition, Between the Lines, John Lopto and Stephen Edwards. We paired together their work in the current exhibition, and they have some really interesting parallels between them that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to dive in, and the show is up for another month till the end of May. You can watch all kinds of materials about the exhibition on our website. We have a virtual exhibition if you're not able to get to LA to see this show, and more materials will be coming out soon as well. I also want to mention that John is going to be in one of our upcoming PBS episodes later this year, so stay tuned for more information on all that. And so let's begin. The show, Between the Lines, has a lot of meaning. It's not just the linearity of their work, it's not just how the two of them approach the art from the line and how the line shapes their work, but it's also that there's a line between the two of them. And I think we should start with that, your earliest roots. So let's see, going back to the early 70s, John was teaching at Harvard prep school,
Yeah.
and Stephen was one of John's earliest students. So what do you remember about each other from those days?
Not much.
No, not much. Not much. And the reason is because I came from Europe. After I was for familial reasons to LA, back to LA, and I had a son to take care of, so I needed a job. So I looked around, I got a job, Harvard came up, and it was in LA, it was where I wanted to be. It was where my art community was. So I took that job, and that was in 1971. And the school had changed from military guns and ammo to a college preparatory school, and that was under Christopher Beresford. So the art program, there was none. So our job was to build an art program. So Stephen was there just for the first 2 or 3 years of that. So it was pretty minimal, but it afforded him a place to come down and then to come from the senior parking lot to the class.
Yeah, I remember, all I remember was that there was a cool new art teacher that people were talking about. You should go down and take this guy's class. And I was a senior, and we didn't really have many classes when we were seniors. And so I took John's class. And the amazing thing was I went to Harvard School when it was Harvard Military Academy. And it was a strict ROTC military academy that we were headed for Vietnam. So this was in 1968, and the students overthrew the military. The Army would send a general every year to inspect the troops and give us our Blue Star rating. And we had drunk women in ranks, just horrible. We lost our rating, and overnight the board decided to turn it into a progressive college prep school and started an art department. And that's where John came in. And we'd run into each other at Glass Art Society conferences. That's our group of people. We're pretty tight. A lot of people working in Glass know each other. But we'd run into each other at conferences. And, kept up with each other all the time.
Yeah.
So early on, did you know that you, Stephen, wanted to be an artist at that point already?
No, I was a surfer. I worked with different teams and competed and wrote Bonsai Pipeline and did the whole thing. I was completely focused on that. But at that time, you couldn't make a living doing that. Now you can. But at that time, you couldn't. So I was at the beach mostly my last 2 years in school.
And John, you were already, sorry?
No art. I had
No art.
No connection to art at all. I had a connection to the beach, to the ocean.
And so, do you remember anything about John's teaching style?
They said he was a super nice guy. He let me slide. On my classes, he understood, and he was busy. He was building a new program.
John, you were midway through your second master's at UCLA.
I had got a master's in ceramics at UCLA in the late 60s, and then I got a position in Europe at the Koninklijke de Porcelein Fles, which is the Queen's Royal Blue Delft factory established in 1652, I think it was. So they were famous for Blue Delft. Everybody knows what Blue Delft is. But after the war, they got into architectural commissions. So I had a master's in ceramics, and I had a connection through a professor at California Lutheran College who had come from the Netherlands, and he was part of the fleeing the Nazis at the end of World War II. And they hired him in a position to do the three-dimensional department and to teach drawing, painting, And so I met him at Cal Lutheran, and he set up a program that allowed you to take, he would be able to send one student or recommend one student, and that student would have to be approved. But I'd already had a master's, so I already had some credibility academically, and so the faculty took me on, and it just exploded, because I did large commissions for them, 50 by 150 feet in ceramics. There's drawings, there's actual photos of stuff we did in the book that's here. So that's my whole venue, was large architectural ceramics. And that was the time of Mason and Peter Volkus and all these people, and it was exploding in ceramics. I had one little anomaly. I got into glass because we did collaborative work with Leerden Glass in the Netherlands. And Leerden Glass is the largest commercial glass producer, and they established an experimental program that brought guest artists in. And the first guest artist they brought in was Marvin Leposki. And if you know glass, you know Marvin Leposki. So we became friends there and first met there in Europe, because I was working with Leerden Ceramics, and then I saw what glass could do. And I just said, I got it, when I get back, I gotta do glass. So I started over there a little bit, just playing around with it. But then in '71, I came back, I got the job, and then I enrolled in UCLA for a second master's degree in glass. So that got me to the world of glass.
How about you, Steve? How do we go beyond surfing and Harvard to...
So then I went to college. My parents sent me to the University of Santa Clara, which is a Jesuit university. I remember visiting and seeing all these Jesuit priests walk by. And what's that? Don't worry about that. Well, it turned out it was a pretty tight place, and on day one you had to pick your major, and I hadn't even thought of that, So I go down the list alphabetically: art, no, business, no, biology. Oh, that sounds cool. So I signed up for biology, not knowing that was the fast track to med school. So all of a sudden I was a pre-med student, taking just a huge load of heavy-duty courses. In my fourth year, my best friend jumped off the roof of the school, killed himself, and I just said, forget it. At that time in California, you could only get 2 Bs your entire 4 years if you wanted to get into a good med school. And these are grade on the curve classes of 150, 200 people. It's really tough, and you just grind through this information. So then I dropped down to junior college. I took a year off, dropped down to junior college, Monterey Peninsula College, a wonderful little college in Monterey, and I did ceramics there for a year, and then the head of the program, Joe Heislam, rest his peace, set up a small glass furnace out of salt brick, and it would last like 2 weeks, and I just watched him blow glass, and I just thought, this is just like magic,
That's important, because nobody knew the chemistry that was involved. That's a major issue, because we had to create the chemistry.
So at the end of the week, he handed me the blowpipe and said, go have some fun. And so I got to blow like half of the tank of glass out, and immediately I went to him and I said, where can I find more of this stuff? And he said, San Jose State. And we went and studied with Dr. Robert Fritz, rest in peace.
Yeah.
He's one of the founding fathers of the contemporary glass movement and was connected to Erwin Eich. So I met Erwin early on, and also the Lubinskis, were a big help to me. So then I got my BFA. There was no BAFA. I got my BFA there at San Jose State, and then did graduate work at Illinois State with Joe Philip Myers for 2 years, and then went into residency in Penn, and I was off and running.
When he says these names, I see every one of them, and I know them, you know, like especially with Dr. Fritz, because this is historical fact. We had a major international architectural conference here at the Ambassador Hotel, and he was the guest speaker. So we're all at a big opening party that night, and all of a sudden they said, Dr. Fritz just died. I'm laughing because you had to be there. Okay, you had to see.
He died on the dance floor.
Yeah.
Dancing with an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah.
In front of his wife.
Yeah. So I see all these episodes. So it's calendrical and historical for me. And I wish I could plug this into all of your heads because you get such an incredible perspective. Because we're old. I'm serious. This has to do with I just turned 80, so we're old. So we have all of this stuff, and we want to get it out there and share it. You know, okay, peace. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, I think exactly the history of what was happening early on in glass, certainly here in California, is, any other individuals that stand out in those early years for both of you who at UCLA, you mentioned some pops to you, but.
Well, I have a thought. When I was in my graduate program there, Harvey Littleton came, and oh God, I'm flashing. One of the early, Mark Peiser. So I spent some time with both people and got to know him really well. And coincidentally, Harvey Littleton was from Wisconsin, where I was from, so there was that other connection, the state-to-state connection. So I became good friends with those people. Those were the really early ones. And they were inventing the chemistry, because compatibility was a problem. You know, when we first blew glass at UCLA, we just threw bottles, everything into the furnace, melted it, and then hoped it all worked. You know, and then we started realizing when you take it out, they all start cracking.
I mean, it's not like being a painter.
No.
You know, that we were there for the birth of the contemporary glass art movement, which grew like a wild mushroom. Galleries popping up everywhere, selling out at pre-opening openings.
Yeah, everything's
It was amazing. And so we saw glass go from nothing to this huge community that would meet yearly at a conference and drink and dance and talk. And we're all really close. I mean, one of our good friends, Jerry King, just passed away in Australia. And I'm as connected to people in Australia and in Asia as I am to my next door neighbors.
What about,
Amazing what we've seen.
aside from the formal and understanding the chemistry and inventing all of that, essentially, what about the ideas? You know, what ideas were you trying to look at for your art early on, each of you?
Okay. I always wanted, I grew up basically in the ghetto, but I loved it. It was the best life one could ever have. I learned how to survive and I loved it. I'm serious. I would recommend it to anybody. Okay. And I learned that you need food, you need shelter, and you need health to take care of yourself. Those were my goals in life. But then I got involved in religion, the philosophical parts. I could not comprehend, the jargon and the things that my Lutheran pastor was telling me about, the divinity and infinity and God and Jesus. And so I just questioned everything. So I started studying religions of the world, and I ate them up. Okay, and that's what shared some of my philosophical pursuits. Basically, One is Friedrich Freudel, The Origin of Modern Art in Kindergarten. There's a lecture on Craft in America that I did for that. That's geometric art. He was the greatest, most important artistic influence, but nobody knows about it. Okay, 1826 is when he wrote his book. That's enough of Freudel. But Freudel is important. Anybody needs to learn about where modern art came from, you need to look up Freudel in kindergarten. Okay, so it's that aspect. And for me, it was drawing female nude forms. So I was really interested in line. And during my graduate glass pursuits, I came up with this whole profound philosophical pursuit that you have to write. And it said all of this, form follows function, form defines form. It's heavy stuff. And then also the most important thing now is this. Where are we going? What are we doing? Why are we here? Right here, America. What's going on in the world today? I have a whole series of these pieces, which in the last 40 years that I've done. Okay, and so those three things: Freudel, religion, okay, the linear form, the following form, and then the American problems and political systems. Those are my influences.
Do you mean that you were interested in them early on in the 70s
So-
too? In the midst of the...
Well, in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get out?
I drew a high number.
Yeah, I got out because I went to college on athletic scholarships, so we didn't have any money, but that was a gift, and that's one of the gifts I had. I wanted to be a professional athlete. Okay, but I got a major injury in my senior year, and when I went to get drafted, I had all these medical reports. I went to the LA draft board. The guy looks at it and he says, "Get on the bus and go to Vietnam." And I said, "This is not my draft board." I flew back to Milwaukee with all my draft documents, and they gave me a deferment. Okay, so I got out of the war. Okay, and I was totally against it. And everybody I knew was. Okay, so that was the 60s. We totally were scared to death. One of the reasons everybody went to college in the early 60s was to get a student deferment.
And the young people now really don't understand.
Don't understand none of it.
What it's like to have a draft. I mean, and you go, you're going to Vietnam, and you're probably going to get killed or see some horrible things that you'll never forget. So that was a lot of fun. For me, I found glass through my life at the ocean. It turned out being a surf really was an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage. I spent countless hours walking up and down beaches and looking at tide pools and sea anemones, and my mother raised orchids, so I was around that a lot. And so when I was in graduate school, the push, of course, is to find your voice. And I realized that my committee sent me to the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago and asked me if that meant anything to me. And I got out of there and I said, "That's it. That's the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen." And it really embodies the feeling I have for the ocean and sea life. And so I started working on that and doing abstractions between flowers, orchids, and sea life. And you got to understand, way back when John and I were starting, nobody knew anything. They didn't know where to get glass, they didn't know where to get tools. If you could just keep it on the end of your pipe, you could get a teaching job. And we just saw it evolve from that into a very sophisticated science now that a few people doing huge work that's very technically challenging. So I was right at home in the glass studio, the roar of the furnace, the sounded like the wind at the ocean, and the heat from the furnace on my face felt like the sun. And I was home. So I got hooked on glass by sitting a Joe High song at junior college, "Do It." I said, I want to go do that, just like you. Just like so many people. I've seen brain surgeons give up their practice and open a glass studio because they took a class in it.
So you both invented the processes essentially. Can you both talk about different processes though for each of you work-wise? How did you figure all of this out? It seems like it was a tight community that was helpful, but can you explain how you did all of that? It's kind of amazing.
Well, I wanted to do large architectural projects all the time. So when I got into glass blowing, then I realized that you can't do 10-foot tall blown walls and cut them. So you're stuck with the little pieces like those pieces over there. So you're stuck with these maquette type forms. And I thought, I want to do this big. How can I do this big? And I found, I bent a little piece of glass in the studio for another piece. And I looked at that and I stood on it, it was 10 inches tall. I stood on its side and I said, I want to see that 10 feet tall. So I just started figuring out how to do it. I grew up learning all the trades, welding, electrical, anything, carpentry, all of the trades I could do, so I had the manual labor I could build myself. And I just started looking at furnace designs. They were all electric. And my theory was, that's ridiculous, because electric emanates heat. I wanted to build a gas furnace. So, because gas circulates the heat, and it heats everything evenly. And when you're bending large work, the key is even distribution of heat throughout the kiln. So I designed a furnace with gas, and I had a genius friend. Steve Carrera was a good friend of mine. He had a contact who was a master furnace builder, and he built furnaces for Kellogg's Corn Flakes and big coffee companies. So he knew the beginning computer programs, which were incredibly primitive, in the 80s, late 70s, They did have programmers that would monitor, but nothing like nowadays. So he knew the expertise behind it, and I showed him what I wanted to do, and he said, well, you build it and I'll make the furnace, I'll make the mechanical parts for it. So I drew up the designs, and this was all just guesswork, okay? But I built ceramic furnaces, and I didn't know a lot about it. And then when I worked in Europe, we had ceramic furnaces that were 100 feet long. So I knew the concept was easy to do. So I built a kiln 10 feet by 14 feet by 4 feet deep, and I figured out how to make it work. And there's pictures of it in the book. But Dave Burnett is a genius behind making the furnace fire work. Okay. And it was just a gift. So for me, it was wanting to use gas because of the way it heated the material. Glass blowing or casting is totally different. That's a closed environment, okay, and you're heating all that material to one temperature. So it's like baking in an oven, So that's the difference in my pursuit. And when I was telling people, I gave a lecture up at Bullseye one time, and that was the last time I lectured because I disagreed with their technician. Okay, that's true. Ted is his name, and so because he said you can only do this with electric furnaces, and I'm looking at him, and I said, Ted, why don't you come down and walk into my furnace? That didn't go well. Okay. And if you know Bullseye, I'm not negating anybody. They're the glass company to buy things from now in the world, probably, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they figured out all the chemistry, and I met them in Mexico City when they were just starting. So it's just kind of interesting.
We're all connected, and we all help each other.
Yep. We were all open to each other.
Yeah. I met another big influence for me was Stanislav and Yaroslav Levensky. I was president of the Glass Art Society at that conference in Mexico. And we had an exhibition at the Rufino Tamayo Museum in Mexico City. And I had this big cast piece, and the Levinskys were like the premier casting people in the world, from Czech Republic. It was state-sponsored, long story. And they were looking at my piece, and I walked up and I go, yeah, that's my piece, what do you think? And they loved it and invited me to come visit them in the Czech Republic, Novibor, which is way north of Prague. And that next summer, I taught at the Bildberg in Frauenau with Erwin Eich. Taught a 3-week class there, and we got in a caravan with some of the students, and we went to the Czech Republic and visited the Lebedskys, where they imparted all their knowledge to me just freely. And I had a wonderful time. They were great people that went through a lot in the Czech Republic. What they saw, going from communism to the Velvet Revolution, it's pretty amazing. And how the glass industry survived that whole thing.
So, and your interest in cast glass, why cast glass?
I was a glass blower for 20 years. I really built my career on blow glass. I did workshops all over the world and love glass blowing because it was so much like surfing. You're riding the stuff and moving and you're feeling the heat. I love the process. I didn't even care what I made for years. And then when I did start caring about what I made, I wanted it bigger. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an I wanted it bigger, so I started making bigger pieces, and we're using yolks and it's complicated setups. And then there's one piece which was a human leg with an animal head on it, fell across my chest and I got pinned underneath it. And after they put the fire out, I said, "That's it. No, I'm not glass anymore. I'm going to gas." But then I met the Lebedskys when I was president of the Glass Art Society and saw the possibilities of casting really from the Czech Republic. And so I wanted to build a big casting program at Alfred, and I wanted to build it with a big casting facility. So it had a huge glass blowing program, 80 students, big operation, and then they let me build. I was a co-founder of the National Casting Center at Alfred University, which was a project with glass sculpture and the foundry guys. So we sold it as a National Casting Center to the state of New York. It was a state school I taught at. They loved that, and they threw like $10 million at us, and we were able to build two separate facilities and just max them out. I mean, we had just the casting facility had 1,500 pounds of hot glass on tap all the time. Same in the blowing thing. We had huge 6 to 8 foot ovens that the students were welcome to use. I have to admit, I built equipment that I wanted to use. Their program followed my career development, really. And with the help of some of the glass engineers who sponsored me in the very beginning, I was in my first faculty meeting, and my chair in the sculpture department stood up and he said, "Hey, we got this great energetic new faculty, but we don't have any money." And Dr. David Pye, who's one of the world's leading glass scientists, stands up and says, "I'll take care of him." And he invited me up to his lab, and he opened up his checkbook and he said, "How much do you need?" He says, "What do you need?" I said, "What do you need first?" I said, "We need controls." People were coming in all night long, turning the ovens down, 2 degrees at a time. It was just crazy. There was controllers in it. So it was like 10 controllers. And they were a third of the glass engineers out there went to Alfred. So our building, the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred, was half art and half engineering. And half of those engineers were glass engineers. So we have contacts at Corning and all over the world. And we're able to get a lot of donations of material from industries.
So let's talk a little bit about your teaching philosophy as well, and how you're simultaneously doing, both of you, doing your work while teaching, how you juggle that, and maybe what you took away from being a teacher simultaneously, or from students.
For me, I just wanted to share information I acquired. I wanted to bring the idea that you can do anything you want to do in your life. And I used the analogy that Einstein, inventor of the light bulb, Edison, initially it said he made 1,000 experiments before he did one light bulb. But then I read this morning that he said, I never made a mistake. I made 10,000 attempts and learned from the 10,000 attempts how to do one thing. But I learned along the way from all of my mistakes. And so I tried to, get young people to see that you can really do anything you want. So basically, and my classes were all electives as yours were. So you never got a student that didn't want to be there. Basically it was sharing information, giving them a realization, what's possible in life. Of course, our situations were different. All of my high school students were, they didn't have financial problems, So, but still, the idea. I'm working with some of them still today. They come back and we talk about, ideas and concepts and projects, and it's really rewarding. So basically, sharing information and helping people grow.
I had a private studio in North Carolina after being an artist in residence at Penland School for 2 years. Then we moved near the school. So I came out of a private studio environment into academia. I found that none of the other professors had any studio experience at all outside of the university. The university was their sponsor. They really didn't know anything about what we call the real world. So part of my mission was to pass on what I knew about the real world from running a private studio for 10 years. I taught studio design and construction classes. I taught glass chemistry for glass artists classes. We talked to them about marketing their work. We had them develop resumes, do presentations of their work. Alfred was an amazing experience. It's just an art school where I taught New York State College of Ceramics, just art school. We got probably very competitive. We got all the top high school kids to go to Alfred, and so these kids were brilliant. You just needed to give them a place to work and get out of the way, and they would do the rest. I saw 100 good things, good ideas every day. I mean, it was amazing. But it was hard to disconnect from that and then switch gears and do your own work. Luckily, Alfred is also unique in the fact that it's run by artists. So your dean is a painter usually, and I had deans. Your teaching schedule was 3 days a week. It was 3 consecutive days. Either Monday, Tuesday you taught, and Wednesday you had meetings, or Wednesday you had meetings, you taught Thursday, Friday. That gave you 5 days to do your work, and you were required to do your work, and you were grilled on it all the time, and you were required to exhibit and travel. So I set up an international exchange program with them and traveled all over the world, and I was just so lucky to have that job. But I was ready to go when I left. You see an institution change so much in 22 years. It wasn't, when I first got there, it was just a wild place. Just naked people running around with clay on them, and crazy professors, and then it went from that to having meetings about driving the forklift and safety meetings and all that kind of stuff. So it changed. I didn't recognize my job by the time I left it.
Well, also the field had changed so much over that time, right?
Yep, it sure had. It was a whole different world.
Yeah.
It was a whole different world. But we were lucky that Alfred, because we were such great students, and we had an outstanding Master of Fine Arts program where we paid the students $650 a month and charged them no tuition to come and work at the biggest facility in the world, biggest school facility in the world. And So we got some really amazing MFA students and amazing undergraduate students. And I'd say probably 80% of them are still in the field. Probably 90% of the MFAs are teaching in universities or running their own studios.
I see the great difference because I was at a school that I had to be there 5 days a week. Okay, and so my schedule was teaching, being at school, but I had a minimum amount of classes and I had time, so I could do a lot of my architectural concepts and designs and drawings and maquette building at the school. For my students, what I really wanted them to learn is that in order to express yourself, you needed to understand the material you're working with. You absolutely had to know it. Because today now, they go to foundries, you know, they go to other people, they make a little drawing on a computer, they go to other people, and they have them fabricated. That was going on because that's what I did in Europe for artists. I mean, I built their work. But what I wanted is for me personally, I always wanted to do things by myself. Okay? Everything, I wanted to know how to do it. And each commission that I did was a different process and a different project. So I built a large studio in Chatsworth, and that's where I made all of my architectural work and my gallery work. And I still have that. So that's mine was daytime students. I could work on projects at school. At night, at 3 o'clock, I'm gone. So 3 to midnight, studio work. And I was gifted with the inability to need a lot of sleep. And then as I read more now, some older artists, they have the same thing. It's just something there. When you get motivated by something, it drives you, it gives you energy. Okay, so I was able to do that. And I used to have a little joke. I'd wake up at 10 o'clock, I get up 10, 11 o'clock and I'd say, my wife is Goldie, was at the time and is still, but the point is, I would say, Goldie, let's go to the Italian restaurant and get a pizza. They don't close till 2. So she would get up and we would go down and eat at Baroni's or one of the local places out there in the valley. And so it was that kind of a lifestyle. You know, I mean, I was gifted. And I still work. I worked out every morning at a gym, and I still do. Okay, so that's what's given me, you know, the physical ability. I just have to admit, at 80, it's kind of, I'm slowing down. You know, it's not what it used to be.
Yeah, John and I were talking just before this thing started, and it ties into one of the questions that Emily asked us, which was, what's next? And that's what I was talking to John about. And both of us are broken down. I've got Parkinson's. He's older than I am.
Yeah.
He's 10 years older than I am. And how do you continue working? Do you continue working?
Yeah.
What I think what really impressed me coming up was I met this potter in Tennessee. He was like 95 years old. And he said, "You see this cup?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I sold this cup for 50 cents 50 years ago." He says, "Now, 1,500. So there's something about longevity that adds to an artist's career. If you bail out early, if you don't keep working, you're forgotten. You know, artists have to push their work. I mean, do publicity, be nice to people, send out, give them business cards and have them over and talk to gallerists and museums. It's work, it's a job. So I always felt like I had 2 jobs. I had my school job and then my art job. And luckily my school job was so easy. I taught 1 class a semester. And then I had seniors and grad students by appointment, which was rare. So I had a lot of time to do my work and be in an art school, which was really interesting.
And a lot of my work, once and began in the late 70s, was with art consultants. Okay, and since what I was doing was definitely unique at the time, it worked. I got a lot of large commissions, and it just grew from there. I did the gallery stuff, and it's like Steve said, in the 80s and 70s, 80s, everything sold. I mean, you had opened the show, and by the opening, everything was sold. So that gave me money also to put back into the business, my business, the studio, and then to build equipment and to further my ideas. And it all just takes a lot of money. I funded mine, but still I was able to do it because of the projects that I was able to do and the clients that I was able to work with. I mean, biggest corporations, Nestle's, Arco, all of the big corporations, Carnation, because they were into art a lot in the 80s and 90s. Okay, Scripps Research Institute. So all of those people wanted to put art, and also there was that percent for the arts thing that came in. A lot of the states now, it really changed the ability for artists to get work, because in order to get the project approved, they have to do a certain percentage toward objects of art. And Europe had done that, and that's where I learned that. That's why in the Netherlands after World War II, the country artists were just in heaven because the country was buying everything from the artists, because they had a percent for the arts program. So that really made the arts bloom in Europe, and it made it here. And it's still there, the percent for the arts thing is still there.
And the structure in the United States, we have a great art structure where you can buy work and donate it to a public institution to get a tax write-off, for example. And there are people that do that. I mean, that's a way of life for them. I was lucky, when I lived in New York, I had a patron that bought everything that I made, and I could call him and say I need money. He says, send me some work. And he bought it through his real estate company and got a tax write-off. Held on to it for 5 years and donated it to libraries, botanical gardens, museums, and got a second tax write-off. He had like 3,500 rental units in Charlotte, North Carolina. He says, I don't want to give the money to the government. And so he just bought tons of work from everybody. It was really amazing, really amazing. An artist's dream, really, to have something like that.
Could we talk a little bit about, I mean, you both clearly have the drive to keep making continually while juggling. And so how does a piece start, or how has that changed? Is it different now than it was? Of you have a burning idea, do you sketch it? How does it go? What's your design process like?
Well, for me, commissions, they all start with a pencil. Okay, so I draw everything out. I don't use any CAD programs. I still have drawn everything out, and then I just figure out, what I want to do for that site, and consult with, in consultation with the commissioner or the developer, and then then I just go from there. That's for commissions. For my own work, I just walk in the studio and see all the junk laying around and start putting stuff together. And if you see my place, you'd realize it's an absolute junkyard. Seriously. Okay, so it's just finding things and doing things, and since we're old, all the ideas are in there. They're circulating out there, and so they're given a chance to be reborn. So the political stuff, that's pretty easy for me now. Okay, with the way the world is, especially our political system. So I use the flag all the time, primarily, and slumping it, bending it, doing different things with it to express what I feel about the political system today. So kind of basically that's the way I work.
Yeah, that's really powerful work. I don't know.
There is no political stuff. No.
There isn't any of that here, but he does some amazing, large-scale, slumped flags, barbed wire, and really, really amazing work. It's interesting, John and I kind of took two different paths. We both started in the gallery scene. There was Kerwin Sumpers
Yeah.
was here.
Yeah.
You know, during the 80s. And then you went off into architectural class, and I stayed in the gallery stream. And I've just always been so lucky in my life. When I was in grad school with Joe Philip Myers, he set up 3 two-person exhibitions, me and him, which he'd never done before. One at Heller Gallery on Madison Avenue in New York City, and one at Habitat Gallery in Detroit, the 2 biggest galleries in the world.
Yep.
And when I went to the one in New York, I was afraid to go to the opening. I was required to be there for the opening, I was afraid. And so I went with a friend downtown, and we drank Bloody Marys and went uptown. He pushed me out of the cab and says, "Go for it, Steve." And I stumbled up to the door, and it was one of those guys who had to ring the bell to get in. And the director, Doug Heller, comes running up the stairs, and I go, "Oh no, here it comes, you know, I'm gonna get it." He says, "You missed it." I said, "What?" He said, "You sold out." My first exhibition in New York City sold out. By the time I drove home to North Carolina, every big gallery in the world was on the phone. And we were just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And like John said, corporations all had big public art collections that they proudly displayed. Where we were in upstate New York near Bosch and Long in Rochester, and they had a huge art collection. And we're buying all the time and displaying the art, and then the economy went down, and they didn't want to flash that around anymore because they were having to lay off people. So having a corporate art collection kind of went away.
So did the commission.
Yeah.
A lot of it,
And what saved John and a lot of people is this 1% for the art chance to get in there.
Let's see, we've definitely not even talked about what's next just yet, but you both are still working constantly and probably going to continue much of what you do now. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about, because, well, certainly for John, your work's not represented in this exhibition per se, but yeah, what is inspiring you right now or as your recent work, let alone we'll save what you're going to do next.
Well, it's just for me, you know, it's the overpowering events of the world that are just taking up too much of my brain. You know, I struggle with it every day, what's going on. You know, so that's, and I don't, you know, I'm thinking about how do I want to express that. I started painting again, and I do a lot of drawing, but it's just a frustrating time. So I'm not sure what's next, and I'm not sure where it'll be, but I just keep myself open to life and to trying to understand and trying to interpret, and then hopefully expressing what I feel and what I'm dealing with daily. So it's changed, drastically changed, you know, within the last couple of years. So that's affected me a lot. So I'm not sure, you know, what the future holds. Nobody is. And I'm not sure where the work will be. Okay.
What about even, and for both of you, you both float between different materials. So, you know, how does that play out? When you start your day, how do you decide, oh yeah, I'm going to start with this versus?
Well, again, I'm really lucky. I'm also a musician, so half of my time is spent playing music, learning new songs. I have Parkinson's, so my brain's dying. And learning new songs and new fingerings is really good therapy for me. And so I spend half of my time doing that. And then my studio time gets pretty precious. I usually have I set myself up with a pretty tough schedule so that I have to keep working. If you have Parkinson's and you sit down, you'll never get up. If I stop working, I'll die. So when I had neck surgery, for example, I've had a bunch of back surgeries, spinal fusion stuff, neck fusion. I'm in the neck collar. What am I going to do? I'll start painting, you know? Painting.
No, no. It's in because I'm the same way. It's like, I sleep minimally and I wake up in the middle of the night all the time and I'm thinking, ideas are coming, and it's just, I gotta do something. I'm still obsessive. Okay, totally obsessive with having to do things. Okay, so I do not rest and I cannot sit. Okay. And I used to read a lot, but now I kind of like listen a lot more and do other things at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's just I don't know. Maybe it's some people say it's a gift, some people say it's a condemnation or a difficulty. It's a frustration, but it's our birth gift. Never being able to stop doing it.
One of my early teachers, Fritz Dreisbach, I was complaining about something and he said, Steve, he says, if it was easy, you wouldn't want to do it. And he was absolutely right about that. It's the challenge, first glass blowing, to get all that down, come up with something new, something that's technically amazing, hopefully, and then later with casting.
What about,
So it's interesting, he mentioned Fritz Dreisbach. He's a lifelong friend.
Yeah.
About 25 years ago, I was able to acquire a property on Whidbey Island, and Fritz is my neighbor. So Fritz and I and Dick Marcus and Rob Adamson and Glassman, on Sunday mornings, Fritz makes coffees. So we go there, sit there and just talk about nothing, or everything. So it's interesting the way that world comes back to you.
Yeah.
Continuously. Once you're in it, all of these people that are there, come back to you.
definitely seems that Glass is such an intertwined community. It's so unique to the art world in other forms. There's not that many. They're so enmeshed. Last question, then we'll open for questions from the public. But I was just going to ask you briefly, Steve, first about your prints and going in that other direction too.
We had a great summer program in our printmaking department, which is, again, a world-class printmaking department with Iris printers and huge format printers. And I took photographs of my glass pieces, detailed photographs, and then collaged them or moved parts of them around to create a hot landscape. And the printmakers were all kind of amazed because there was no other way you could get those colors and stuff. And you can't manufacture that stuff. Maybe now with AI. But that's how that came about. So I spent a whole summer making prints and making hundreds of prints. I really enjoyed it. It's a different way of looking at your work and looking at the world flat.
Were you able to do that in Ohio or
In Alfred.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could take classes for free in the summertime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now they print stuff for you? Is that the way it works?
I have stuff printed in Ventura.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I have all the files and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It was great when I was at Alfred. The economic climate went from glass being the most expensive department to computers being the most expensive department. And it was great. The pressure was off. They needed like $250,000. I only needed like $20,000. I remember Fritz telling me when I first got my job at Alfred, he said, Steve, they could cut you off at any time. You order 3 times what you need. And that's exactly what I did. And ended up with this huge stockpile of glass and furnace materials and burners and all this stuff that we used. It was fantastic. But now I understand the $1,500 toilet seat.
So then I guess last question, what excites you the most about what you see happening in glass now? Hopefully something.
I have no idea. Well, it's just, there's so many people, so many divergent approaches to stuff. it's just like, it's overwhelming. I don't.
You mean compared to when
Oh
you were
my
started?
God. There was like 20, 30, then 100, then a couple hundred people. Now there's thousands of them. Tens of, literally thousands of students doing stuff. And it's just, when you look, the Corning does this yearly, where you send, yearly a book where you send in photos and then they choose several hundred, the new glass review it's called. And so when you look at that, it's like, wait a minute. But the other thing I look at it, I say, we did that years ago. And wait a minute, and that got in the book. I'll tell you, every year for the last 10 years, I've sent in political flag stuff. Nada. Are you kidding? No. You get this nice little letter. Well, thank you for sending in the information, but they just stay away from anything that's, has a little heat to it.
I'm blown away by the technical abilities that people have now. I mean, people were blowing beer bottles and struggling to get anything in the dealing of them. Now people are making delicate, amazing Venetian ware and their own ideas and getting shows in galleries. The galleries are interested in the new and exciting.
Yeah.
Not this. So it's been interesting for me also to see the evolution of an artist. And I read all the art mags, like Art America and stuff. A lot of interesting articles in there about aging artists or galleries going out of business.
Yeah.
Probably 80% of the galleries have gone out of business in glass that were glass galleries. It's only really 2 or 3 left. And they've gobbled up everything. They're big things you show 200 other people.
Yeah.
And back when we were coming up, it was solo exhibition. Every time. So the whole landscape is completely changing. But I dig it. I dig the young people. I think they're doing amazing work. I love talking to them. I love visiting their studios. You sneak in and you talk to this guy and he's telling you all about his stuff. He goes, what do you do? And I put my arm around him. I go, I'm your grandpa and you don't even know it. And I handed my business card and I said, hey, just check this out,
That is so much fun.
And they write to you and they go, wow.
It is. It's really humbling, actually.
Yeah. We get respect from our colleagues.
Well,
It's humorous.
and on the flip side, you are both constantly reinventing and doing new. It doesn't stop, so.
There was one thing, when we started, lamp working was nothing.
Yeah.
It didn't even, nobody did lamp work. That's the stuff they used to do at Disneyland, and you make all those little things. Now, it's a major art movement. And the beauty of the lamp working thing is, you make your object and you don't have to anneal it. So that takes out the whole process that we have to figure out. The annealing times related to thicknesses, all the calculations. It's phenomenal. I see what they're doing too. Yeah. So that one. And fusing was another one that was nothing until Bullseye really got onto it. And there were a couple other companies. One was up in Washington. I can't remember right now, but Randy owned one of them. I remember him, but I don't remember the name of the company. So those things were all beginning, and now it's just, they're gigantic. People are buying little furnaces for their garages to do fusing. So you go on the internet, and what we used to get some considerable money now is $20, $30 because they can copy it. And so it's just that whole market has become prolific, but it's also just taken away from old timers.
Well, questions from the audience? Yeah.
Let's hear about your relationship with color and even the selection of glass and how I see John's glass, it has there's an iron in it. Versus the clearer. And the properties and
Well, in the blowing and the casting, the chemicals are added to the glass to create the color. Okay, and you can also use, I used some early China paints, China paints. Farrell Frick was the company that made the first industrial glass painting, where you could paint it on the glass, then it was fired to about 1,000 degrees and it was permanent. So in the 70s, that was the only paintable material that was used. So I worked with Farrell Frick. Some of a couple of those pieces over there have the Farrell Frick fired in them. So that was the limit of color at the time. You know, I mean, we knew cobalt worked, and then if you put in, you could put in gold and all these chemicals, selenium, cadmium, and they all affected the color, but we had to figure it out. See, so, right, yeah, basically.
There was just one, for both glass cores, there was just one company, Kugler.
Yes.
And Kugler, their colors didn't even fit each other. It was horrible. And so a lot of us figured, well, we're just going to have to make our own glass.
Yeah.
And so I was down and I had a residency at Penland School, North Carolina, and there's a big glass community there and some really amazing glass chemists. Fritz Dreisbach was there, Mark
Peiser was one of the keys.
Rob Levin,
really amazing guy.
Richard Ritter. They all made their own glasses, clear glass, opal glass, opaque glass. Mark Peiser would work. He would work for a year and a half just to develop a glass that he wanted to work with. Richard Ritter would throw away whole tanks of glass if there was one bubble in it. I mean, it was amazing to see, and I learned from all those people. They shared their information with me freely, and so I have all those formulas. And then I was a consultant at Fenton Glass Works, a big American glass company for a few years. And
That was Joel Myers too, wasn't that?
He was designer there.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of colored glass from that.
More questions?
No, that's about it. Oh, with my glass, the architectural stuff, you can't get large sheets of glass except with the green tint in it, because it's a functional architectural glass. And so one of the only places in the world, there's two now, one's in France and one's in Italy. Pittsburgh Plate and Pilkington make it, but they don't do the 1 inch anymore. And so the reason why it's green is because in order to do massive amounts of glass, it's not ultimately purified. So there's a very, very minimal amount of iron oxide in it. And the iron oxide is what gives it the green tint. It's like Celadon glazes in ceramic history. A little bit gives it a green, a lot of it gives it a red, but that's not true in glass. It just gets a different color, the more intensity. You can now get optically clear crystal in sheets, but it's not in a real thick material. And it's just more expensive.
It's crazy.
Shot Glass was the company that started doing the sheets. And Bullseye makes now clear sheets too. But they're not big. You know, so the only way I can get 8 by 12 foot sheets would be from Pilkington until 1980. Ford Glass made it until 88. And then they quit. And so then we just ordered from Europe. I mean, it just came in crates of ships and trucks, and we just moved it around.
Amazing.
And you figure all these, the thing is that you don't just move it around. You got to have cranes.
Yeah.
So I built all these things, forklifts. So I built my own cranes and my own forklift hookup system. So you build all those to be able to do the work. But see, that for me was the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's play. I played all of my life. Okay, this was my little sandbox, and I was able to. I got to make something different today. I got to make a new piece of equipment, and so I played with it. And I had some really good friends along the way that loved playing. Okay, so we just had a great time. You know, so it wasn't a chore or a task. It was fun. It's always been fun. I have to admit now it's getting a little bit of a task sometimes, you know. But it's just because the energy's, you know, the energy's gone. The enthusiasm's there, but you know, you get tired.
It's
Something new.
your athletics are required, yeah. And Steve, with when you're pouring
Yeah.
your molten glass from those, I mean, it's amazing what you've built
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
Yeah, you just have to run with your imagination. We were making these big 7-foot glass pieces with ladles of glass out of the furnace. So I had 6-person crew, usually my seniors. And we do the big gulp, which is a ladle with a big section of walnut on top of this massive thing. And we'd empty a 500-pound tank in like 4 minutes. They were constantly running ladles, and I was in the oven clipping and torching. And then when I left the university, I got a professor emeritus status, which means you're welcome to use the facility for life. But I didn't want to go back there. That's where my job was. So I built a studio at home. And I didn't have access to students like I did before.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have access. I wanted the new guy to have access to the students. So I said, well, how can I do this by myself? So I built a 500-pound capacity tilt pour furnace that all was on push-button winches and railroad tracks and, whatever it takes to get the job done. And most of that stuff doesn't exist. You have to invent it. And that's the fun part.
That is the fun. That's totally the fun part. Is making this stuff, and then when you get it done, it works. It's just playing. We're playing.
We're plumbers and electricians
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
construction guys.
Engineers.
I love it.
Yeah. And it's like, I did study engineering for a while, but God, was that boring. And I did study architecture too, because they were jobs, And I thought, geez, I'm doing this, So I was lucky to find the right professors to say, you have an artistic ability, go there and use it and commit your life to that. Jerry Slatton and Ben Weber, both emeritus somewhere. Okay.
The 2 really great pieces of advice I got when I started teaching was, the first one is that students, just like having a student is like having a puppy. You gotta keep them on a leash so they don't run away. If you hold them too tight, they'll pee on your leg. And the other thing, Val Cushing, who's a famous, rest in peace, potter, he told me, he said, Steve, everybody in their life has one good teacher. It really made a difference in their life. I know I did.
Yeah.
John did. I know all of you did.
Yeah.
It's your job to be that teacher for someone. And I really took that to heart. And I run into former students and they say stuff to me like, I'll always remember what you told me, Steve. And I say, first off, what's your name? Who are you? And what did I say?
Yeah, exactly.
So you never know the impact that you're going to have on a student. They may be rebelling or whatever it is. But in college, they go from being kids, right out of high school, to being adults, going out into the world. So you see this huge transformation. You really watch them grow up and hit the streets running. It's so exciting. Where I went to grad school, where Joe Myers taught, he had to teach a ceramic class. There was an elective, and basketball players took it, and all his students were ag majors and corn shuckers, and never had a student that went on to graduate school. I was just so lucky to just luck into this job. It had so many opportunities for me.
Yeah. That's why Harvey Littleton started the studio, the first on his farm. In his barn.
Yeah.
So this is really grassroots stuff. I'm so blown away at how far it's come. It just freaks me out. And how good the young people are. My God.
Well, thank you both. This has been amazing. We could do a whole part 2 just on the history that we could get from your stories of the whole field, certainly, but this has been phenomenal.